All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to CGAO's monthly webinar series for February 2025. As always, sponsored by Mathur GIS Solutions. My name is Gabe Durant. I'll be your moderator for this session. Today's presentation is on data governance with Pravin Mathur. Pravin is a senior project manager with Resource Data Inc., specializing in GIS solutions for local government, defense, and homeland security. With extensive experience in geospatial technologies, he has led projects for the City of Richmond, naval facilities, Army National Guard, and Homeland Infrastructure Foundation level data. His work spans enterprise GIS implementations, spatial analysis, and data management, ensuring that geospatial solutions support mission-critical operations. Pravin is also known for his mentorship, guiding GIS professionals in their careers and technical development. Welcome, Pravin. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gabe. And thank you, County Geospatial Association of Ohio, for hosting me, giving me this opportunity. I will share my slides. Give me a second. All right. So my again, the views or the things that I talk about are not, in any way reflective of the region board's stand on anything or my employer. I bring to you my journey as I sort of dived into understanding what data governance is, and hopefully, the end you will not have a prescriptive offering from me, but my intent is to stir up thoughts on this topic. And, again, the context is your own agency and your own organization. So, the geospatial technology capabilities, as I read in the Arc News, ArcUser, the latest edition, they list five key components, and governance is one of them. So going back, the Geospatial Data Act of 2018, the FAIR principles introduced in 2016, spurred many organizations to begin their governance journey, and a lot of programs were established. So when I was approached, I just put this blurb to say that this is what I would like to speak or share my views on, where the theme is the data governance, and I just listed a few items and I am highlighting those, which will be key tenets of my talk. So data is an asset, and we talk about its value. And once you are able to sort of talk about the value, then there lies the real value of the governance, in my opinion. So let's start by looking at data as an asset. Data drives governance and policies. It optimizes resources for operations. Definitely for all of us who work in the service delivery area, it is improving the service delivery and transparency. And when the data is not structured or is not of good quality, it leads to inefficiencies and risks. The field of data governance is expanding to include new capabilities that address emerging needs and evolving organizational priorities. Data literacy, where everybody in the agency wants to know and understand the data. There is definitely a trend on the relevance and the importance of storytelling, as how the data insights communicate decision making. How do they engage with people, how people can relate to the initiatives and the programs that the agencies are rolling out, and how things can be replicated, what kind of insights are being provided, how things can be replicated, how do you use sort of an ecosystem concept where there are certain tools that you build out, certain templates or data solutions around specific business use cases. These are the overarching trends that have evolved over time. And these are the reasons why we need to lay the importance on data or look at data as an asset. So then the question comes like, what is data governance? A set of rules? Is it some tool? It's some ID function? I really like Robert Steiner. I see a lot of his literature, and his definition seems to be very simply stated. It is all about formalized accountability for data. The right people define, produce, and use data. And that data is reliable, it's accessible, secure, and used responsibly. So it kind of goes back to the fair data principles that are set out as a best practice: findable, accessible, repeatable, and identifiable. Data governance ensures, again, it's kind of saying the same thing, but it establishes that the data is available, secure, usable, and is accurate. And there are policies, roles, responsibilities to make sure that the data is of integrity, good currency, complies with regulations, and above and all, it is trustworthy and consistent. Why should we even think about governance as we are sort of uh, building this idea of having governance? In today's digital landscape, organize, generate vast amounts of data, which, if not properly managed, lead to inefficiencies, compliance risks, and poor decision making. The need for having some sort of a governance or a control or sort of practice principles is even more, because we know if you have good quality data, then it is enabling in terms of its how it augments operational efficiencies, how you can bring about compliance, whether it's privacy laws or freedom of information or access to information, how everybody who's touching and using the data uses the same terminology, calls it in the same way, gets the same output. And then the onus is on us to make sure that the data that we have, whether it's at an organizational level, at a business functional level, or at an asset level, or at the individual PII, personal identifiable information, all that is managed, and we are making sure that there are no authorized users of that data. So all that said, why, again, driving back home, because value of data governance is the key. And so why should agencies or any county need data governance? Because the risks are many. If you have bad data, then obviously the results, the reporting, the whatever you are using that data for decision making is not up to the quality, is inconsistent, is not up to date. And there may be a lot of data silos. So one agency, one department calls a particular item of information something else, whereas the other calls it differently. So there is a need for standardizing the information. There is a need for controlling who can get access to the data and what use can that data be put to. And the benefits definitely are if everybody is using the same standard terminology, then there is clear communication that promotes collaboration, brings in efficiency. And if the data is kept up to date and current and is consistent, then it helps decision making, and which in turn help provide better services, whether they are just providing information or they are providing information about the services that the agency or the county provides to its citizens. So now let's look at a quick review of what data governance as per the data management book of knowledge is. And it says governance is the exercise of authority and control over the management of data assets, planning, monitoring, and enforcement. Mark the words authority and control, and let's go further. A lot of us at times, when we talk about data, this is true for me, data governance, data management, are they the same thing or there's some distinction? So I dived into looking at that as well. So governance is a framework which, again, we proactively manage organized data, how it can be used, who can use it, and you define certain roles and ways of doing work around the data. Your management is a more technical function where it talks about how will you store it, what's the architecture, how is the data going to be accessed, how do you collect it or curate it, and if there is, again, curation of the data, the aggregation, however the usage is going to be driven. Clear distinction. Governance focuses on accountability, integrity, consistency, security, compliance, whereas management is all about how you can focus on the processing, the maintenance, the availability, the storage, the access, so that it brings efficiency and brings, enhances the performance of around that data. This is very simply and very clearly depicted by this graphic, which says that if you are managing digital assets or enterprise information or enterprise data, it's all about focusing on organizing, managing access data within the organization. But data governance is doing the right things. And data management is the execution side, do it right. So there is a distinct separation of duties, the quality, the sustainability, the roles, and the expectations of those functions that you are performing when we talk about data governance. And John's graphic on LinkedIn was like the perfect thing that perhaps the best way to have explained it in simple ways is one is about do everything right. That these are best practices. If you don't adhere to them, obviously you will not be executing them correctly. So that distinction, that separation is driven by how the duties or the tasks related to those two separated data governance versus data management. Looking at it further, there is a tiered perspective on looking at data governance and the whole domain of data, as in terms of using these terms are loosely used in common communication. And we sometimes refer to data strategy and how does it overlap with governance, or the confusion between data governance and data management. Data strategy operates at the strategic layer of an organization. It involves designing a logical way and guiding the organization towards its goals. When we do not know everything that's coming, whether it's changing nature of operations or changing nature or evolving software or changing organizational priorities. So the conditions for which you define the operating framework is kind of unpredictable, but that's the strategic. So you are defining, that is how data strategy is defined. The other extreme on the data management, it is how you are, going back to the previous slide, it is how you are implementing, executing. So it exists focusing on the execution of the daily tasks to ensure that the data is used efficiently, is reliable, is effective, and is available at different tiers based on roles and access and whatnot. But the data governance part is the function at the tactical in between the two, between uncertainty and execution, between a vision and how it's done, where you translate strategic business direction into specific actions, keeping people, processes, and technology in view. But they're all directed towards that. That's the tactical part of it, is that they're all directed towards a value proposition. If you do certain things in a certain way, they are bound to deliver value. If you are defining certain roles, then people know what is expected of them. So you are staging and framing the accountability portion. And you're also building in logic that, okay, if you do things in a certain fashion, then the outcome, the implementation will flow, or it is deriving from the logical framework that is part of your data strategy, overall data strategy. So keeping that in mind, which I briefly hinted, is that your governance is directed towards aligning people, processes, and technology. And how do we go about sort of talking about those? The people, we have different roles, different sort of subgroups defined in a governance program: data stewards, governance committees, the IT support team. Then what are the standards? What are you trying to comply against? And what frameworks are the sort of extents in which work is to be directed and performed? And what are the technology tools? Data catalog. How do you go about organizing and storing the data? And what technology and tools are you going to be using to make sure that the data is being directed and is available to all those who are authorized to be users? So putting even this in further simpler terms, we look at the aspects, the organization, the business, so the what, where, who, and how. the organization, the where and the who. What are the business aspects? What is required to be done? And then the technical aspects, how do we go about it? So data governance is not, if you break it down, it is kind of very simple to understand. And that is what I understood for myself. And that is exactly what I'm sharing with you all. But even when we know, there has to be something that talks about how you will set this in motion, because data will not govern itself. If you recall, the data, the DMBOK says data governance is the exercise of authority and control. So it kind of brings about three different approaches in governance that I could interpret from all the literature or that are in prevalence. So the first one is the command and control, which is right out of the book from the data management book, DMBOK, which is exercise of authority and control. There is a very structured hierarchy, there are very specific roles. People are defined and mandated to perform certain duties. So it becomes your duty rather than an area of interest. And whether I am a user, stakeholder of the data or not, it is my job, my mandatory role to ensure that the data aspects of data governance are adhered to. And yes, it does have a benefit that, yes, because it is mandatory, people will be required to, fulfill that. However, there is a shift that reflects the understanding that successful governance is not an authority and control thing anymore. It requires, because if I'm a user of data, I am a stakeholder. Therefore, I do have a voice as a user, or I do have a voice as a data steward, or I do have a role as the data creator. So, because there is so much of emphasis on, whatever you're building out has to be beneficial for the end users, for the stakeholders. So there is a desire to solicit or to elicit stakeholder buy-in. As somebody who's part of the data life cycle, I want to know what my role is. How can I be an active participant, whether as a user, as a contributor to the data? And so empowering data stewards, bringing about data literacy awareness, and integrating this into the business process has sort of become the new paradigm, if you will say, for which is a stark shift from that command and control approach. So there are two other sort of swim lanes in which governance works. One is the command and control, the first one, which again is right out of the book. Then there is the other extreme, which is the traditional, which requires, if I have and I'm personally interested and I have direct experience and I'm directly involved with that work, there is that voluntary interest in that data. And therefore, I would like to see that the data that I'm working with, the data that I'm generating or using, leveraging, is good quality, consistent data. That is all a voluntarily your contribution based on your interest. And because it is not a mandatory, does not have a mandatory role or a definition to your role, it does not. So there may be other pressing priorities that are required of your functional role, and sometimes your interests may have to take a back seat. So the demerit there in a traditional approach is a consistent engagement and lack of structure or a systematic way or a timely way of doing things. The third one is the hybrid or the non-invasive. So Robert Siner is a big proponent, or probably he has come out with this non-invasive data governance, and some literature and experts use it, also call it hybrid, which is based on how my role is related to the data that I am working with or contributing to. My workflow already has an alignment, has my hands are in the data. So I am, because of my role, vested in that data. And it is equally my responsibility to make sure that the data is good quality, consistent. And because I am working directly with that data, do command some sense of ownership, some sense of accountability, some sense of expertise with that data. So these are the three approaches. Definitely, there is a shift. You will find different agencies have different flavors of them. Maybe it sort of comes down to, oh, well, this is a data set that, he works in the community development department, and yeah, he contributes a lot. So that's one flavor. The old conventional flavor of where we have defined roles, and then the third one, which is kind of a hybrid, you will find all of these three at play. What works for the agency is what really, really matters. So understanding the roles in data governance is crucial for the effective implementation. Data stewards are responsible for data quality, while governance committees oversee policies. The IT team plays a critical role in implementing technology and safeguarding the data. Together, these three in combination ensure that the governance framework, the guidelines are implemented, and these roles are essential, the key ingredients for any data governance program. Data stewards, when I was managing the Homeland Infrastructure Foundation level data, which hosts about 500 plus data layers, it was very, very important to sort of um, repeatedly communicate across to on both sides that we are data stewards. We do not make changes to the data. So anything that we can talk about, how the data that we receive has consistent quality, has good metadata, has all the key elements of metadata populated. It has, there is a way to reach back to the data creators uh, and help facilitate the end users sort of create that feedback loop to relay any questions about how the data was collected, what attribution they have, what does it imply, and then as the stewards to ensure that the data is used appropriately and effectively in compliance with the rules and the guiding policies of the agency that is creating that data. The governance committees are responsible for creating and enforcing policies. What are the overarching goals for the organization? And what are we trying to ensure such that the objectives, the overall organizational goals are met and there is equal representation. Each of the business units, the stakeholders, are represented on this committee so that everybody's usage, everybody's perspective on that data is incorporated in anything that will, that decision, that alignment that will be set, or that data policy that will be set forth by the governance committee. The IT teams, they are the sort of implementing the technology solution. They are the implementation arm. They make sure that anything and everything that is done is compliant according to the security and the regulations. And there is collaboration on the organization, the usage of the data, and the overarching policies for data usage, data practices, privacy regulations. All of that is adhered to at scale, whether it is at the data level, whether it is at the access level. So they are the collaborators that work with all the other roles to make sure that nothing is lost in translation. There is full adherence and compliance to the policies and the practices of that agency. So these roles, the definition of these roles is very important because it just, there is no room for any second guessing or, oh, that he was supposed to do. So there's no passing of the responsibilities. Those roles, they help establish accountability and ownership of the data. And once the ownership and the accountability are established, then it is the onus of that person, that role, to make sure that the data is consistent, there is a quality control, quality check, so that when decisions are being made using that data, they are driven by the data, they are sound, and there's no ambiguity or lack of clarity around the data. So putting data to effective use to maximize the value, to derive the value of data, to use the data for decision making, the roles have to be clearly defined. As we define, taking this further, not only look at it at scale, the role of an individual has to align with the business outcomes. So I will just go advance. I this is where how I see it. I call it the line of sight, where everyone understands there's a top-down visibility, that the overarching strategic plan, the policy, the strategy, what are the organizational objectives and the key initiatives, what are the performance measures or measures of success, are all clearly understood at the execution level. So who does what, when, and where? Me, as the person down the food chain, understands why my work is relevant. What will be the risk if I let pass through me data that is not consistent? So understanding all of that is key, and the line of sight is so important because not only does it give value to every individual in that chain, but it also helps translate what data, what metrics are feeding to the broader business outcome, to that broader service delivery. How does it impact? How's the senior leadership looking at the metrics, the data that I am contributing to producing? Or how am I suffering from a lack of clarity of understanding of how what I do aligns with the bigger organizational objective? So the line of sight, or this clear transparency in understanding what are we doing, to what purpose, is so relevant. And I will say this for myself, that, and maybe I can generalize it too. A lot of us in the geospatial community and profession are unfortunately victims to this, that we are asked to produce a report, a map, without understanding what and how and where, for what purpose, what audience this is going to be used. Same thing if you look at it and say, all right, if an asset does not have certain information in the system of record, how will a report be produced that gives you any indication on the condition or the usage of the data? So there is a very clear, going back, the line of sight on why do we have this attribution. Why do we need to ensure a certain quality or a threshold around the quality of this data? Because in the end, it is going to feed the outcome of what you or the agency are going to be producing. So it is a micro to macro visible swim lane, where everybody, when they understand, then the value, the relevance of that work, that implementation becomes clear. So how do we go about sort of, doing this? And we all understand that, somehow, somewhere we are all, users of the data or contributors to the data. But how do we make sure that this governance, the communication around the data, is happening all the time at different levels? At the orientation, the very start, when somebody joins the company, it is an essential part of the orientation that the corporate culture, the culture of the organization, is about, having a data-centric mind, understanding, that at all the time we're looking for insights. How does this data help, uh, you know, you in your decision making process? So why does it matter? What value does it give? And how does it affect you and your responsibilities? So if I am a GIS analyst and I allow a certain laxity in the quality of the data, I should very well understand that this is going to snowball, and ultimately over time we will just have garbage data and no decisions, reliable decisions can be made. From an organizational perspective, it is very important to communicate what support and resources are available. Who do I go to if I have a question about the data? Where should I report to? If anybody, whoever is at some point has a shared touch point in the data lifecycle, whether it's from the creation to the end using or use of the data, they should know that if I find any a wrong entry or an outlier and abnormal value in the data, who do I point it to? Who do I report it to? So what is it that I need to know in terms of my organizational support structure? And then what what onboarding, again, awareness to active participation. So one is like setting the foundation where we as an organization or as a company make sure that data is a valuable thing. So don't mess with it, don't uh, you know don't edit it, don't modify it, don't change it, don't just make a copy. When again, back to a lot of us, we make local copies and start working with those local copies, but then they are out of sync. And what does that lead to? We basically go off on a tangent where the quality and the consistency and the currency of the data is compromised, and your data and your reporting is no longer authoritative. All through it is, how do you make that, plant the seed for that awareness and then change it to active participation? And then how do you continually sustain the engagement? How do all stakeholders, how are we keeping our stakeholders informed that this data set is undergoing these changes, these updates? How does the governance, how does their role in the governance framework change or is changing? And how should or why should they continue to contribute? That communication piece is very important, and it becomes sort of part of the flow of the organization. Whether you are bringing somebody on board, you are making them aware, they're included in some sort of data communications and updates, and constantly informed of changes that are being made to the data sets. How do we go about? So again, the end objective is, how do we foster a data-driven culture? And one of the good things about what we do is to break those silos, to make sure that you have effective communications. You establish, these are kind of things that probably are analogous to any kind of a program where you establish a clear vision and purpose, and you look at the low hanging fruit, you test that, you frame the workflow, the roles, there's accountability, you engage with people, and you look at how this can be scaled. for other things. So back to the point of creating that ecosystem where you're building out processes and workflows that are replicable. And also then look at how do you measure success. So that performance indicator of how you are looking at your data, its quality, its accuracy, its completeness, its compliance, and again, how much support are you providing so that you increase your user base? Some examples that are like, what's the percentage of your data that is clean and error free? What is the threshold that you have adopted for having values for the attribution? How do you check for duplicate records? And how do you keep track of people who are using the data? So what's the penetration rate? What's the adoption rate for your data? Those are all factors that you will use to measure your success. Why? Because again, if we do not have quantitative measures of success that we can sort of relate to or tally against, how do we get leadership buy-in? So the leadership buy-in, in my understanding, is two sides of the coin. Either you have a value proposition where you talk about, how much additional revenue or something, the benefits that you are sort of being able to capture, quantify, and showcase to get a leadership buy-in. Or the other flip side is, well, if you don't have it, what does it do? You keep producing bad data, people will stop using the data. If you are talking about specific assets and you have really poor data on those assets or those services, people will not even know, and then there will be no reliance or reliability on the services that you offer. So however it works in your organization, however, wherever you are, because again, it is not a one size fits all. It is not a one time solution, because it is a continuum where you sort of evolve to a state of maturity. You can start with whichever end you want. If you do not have quantitative data to qualify and showcase the benefits in terms of, X% saving or 34% more users of data, then you sort of tilt towards the risk proposition. Either way, in my opinion, whichever route you go, it is going to give you the benefit. If you are communicating the risk, then also you have a fair path to bringing in leadership buy-in. If you have the value proposition, then also you have a way to get to leadership buy-in. So data governance is definitely beneficial because you're producing high quality data, you're helping better decision making, you're ensuring the data is in compliance, you're promoting understanding of the data. Therefore, people can at least know where the data is, or that particular group within the agency collects that data. Maybe let's go and talk to them. And once you have good data, then you can generate insights that can help in better decision making. So in conclusion, I will say that data is an asset, but for it to be valuable, you have to sort of put it in a governance framework. And that governance framework, because it works around people, policies, and tools, it helps understand that there are defined roles for everyone, which will translate into who does what, when, where, and how. And that in turn will be the driver for compliance, security, and continuous improvement. Data governance, this is leading a thought that I would like to leave you with, that data governance is not just a tool or a policy. It is a culture that brings together people, processes, and technology. And to what objective? To unlock the true value of data. So, reverting back, data is an asset, but it needs to be governed. And why should we govern it? So that we can derive value out of the data that we are doing. And if propositions, because if we can showcase the value in terms of quantifiable data, we use the value proposition. If not, we start with the risk proposition and gradually work towards building how much value we can generate. It is also about how you don't stop. It's not a one time effort. It is an ongoing where you have to continually show that whatever I'm doing is contributing, it is augmenting the value of the data, and it is helping unlock the true value of data. Thank you.
Thank you, Pravin. That was great. Great insights on data and responsibilities surrounding it, both individually and as an organization. We do have a few minutes left. If anybody has some questions, you can throw them in the chat or raise your hand and I can unmute you. If anybody has anything, that would be great.
And as I said, again, there is no prescription from me because I'm a learner like you all. And the thought process came to me that, okay, we all, create our versions and we do our edits. So we do have some sort of a structure around trying to maintain the quality of the data. But if you read more about it and you try and understand more about it, it is all about a steady, continuous effort and a sustained effort. And again, the people are the key. And if we feel, each one of us feels vested as a user, as a contributor to the data, then we can all collectively, it is a team sport. It is not a one person's effort or one team or one group effort. It is an organizational team sport. And everybody's contribution is very, very integral to making sure that we are able to capture quantifiable evidence that we are adding value because we have put some sort of a framework, guiding framework, policies, roles uh, to make sure that we strive to produce good data.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much, Praveen. This was really great. I really appreciate you presenting for us today. We look forward to hearing from you in the future. Hopefully, maybe you can come back in a little while and give us some more updates on this because it's something that we can all use, no matter what type of organization we're in. So thank you again. Thanks to everybody for joining. We do have another webinar coming up next month if you guys are interested on digital twins. So check that out coming up in March. Once again, thank you all. I really appreciate it. Guys, have a great day. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Bye.